looking to start your own Victorian Sims 2 neighborhood challenge and confused about where to start? Well, to be honest, you probably should be, because by the time that I finished writing out these rules, the entire document turned out to be 9 pages. And look, this isn't even everything. This is just, I think, kind of the basics about where to begin. So some of you guys have really been asking for this, and thanks to Jammy Anna Bana for reminding me that maybe like getting this out sooner than later is probably the best call, because I've already done a spreadsheets tutorial. However, this is really what's going to help you figure out where to start and just like walk you through the basics of beginning the challenge. So I'm going to walk you through my document, and feel free to ask any follow-up questions in the comments, or also you could just hop on the Discord and ask some questions there as well. I'm really happy to accept feedback and criticism on this because it is a moving, mobile, and completely dynamic document and challenge. So I would like to adjust it the way that is best for all of us to play. Ideally, this game is really structured around like a build a city challenge, but it primarily focuses on the social aspects of 19th century English country life. So your families are deeply intertwined with one another, part of a larger social structure that dictates the neighborhood and can rise or fall through the ranks of society. So to begin, what you want to do is create 3 families. Each family should be spouses and with no children. They should start out with your standard 20,000 simoleons, so you won't have to do anything there. And this places them quite comfortably in the lower class with enough money for a small cottage and items for a craft or trade from which they will make their livelihood. Although they start out at the bottom, ideally these are the families that will reach the highest social and wealth ranks first. Because this will make up the entirety of your new town for now, place their lots next to each other. Your Sims need some form of community, and this will make up your first parish. Typically, I use the second smallest lot, so it's a small lot that's pretty square. However, you can also download some even smaller lots, and those I typically like to use for the more downtown area of the neighborhood, which I usually build up a little bit later once we're quite properly in the lower middle class. And I know that some of you also like social progression and variation in your families to happen a lot earlier. This is just the way that I like to play. So if you want to do this in a more traditional build a city challenge way, and or even like the medieval charter challenge, and have multiple families of different social classes starting out, go right ahead. You can do that and still follow these rules. You may add 1 new family every Monday, and I like to do this on Monday because it will keep everyone in the neighborhood on the same day of the week. Because if you start a new lot in The Sims 2, it always starts on a Monday. I know there are some mods to change this, but to be honest, like I'm fine starting this way and not worrying about it. Sorry, you might be hearing my cat play with paper. That's my thesis research, so things are great in my household right now. Your new family may be any size and start out with as many kids as you would like. However, ideally the children should be the same age as the children in your 3 main families so they can marry in. And you may give them as much wealth as you see fit. However, you are restricted to only giving them the wealth and social status of the highest level already reached in your existing game. That means that your first and second additions to the neighborhood will also likely be lower or possibly even lower middle class. You are allowed a phone and a computer, ideally a CC phone and typewriter in the house, but may only use the computer to write novels, an action which is not unlocked until the lower middle class. So because this is a 19th century challenge, this does mean that you are extremely limited in the types of technology that you can use. So these are really the only 2 pieces of technology I actually allow in my game. And Unfortunately, this game relies very heavily on custom content. I say unfortunately because I know this can be a very long process to actually go through and find everything and make sure it's working, especially with, the limitations on an older game. So if you're uncomfortable with modded games, and you want to do this challenge, you're probably gonna have to get over that discomfort pretty quickly. There are really 3 things that every household should have: a well or pump from which you can fetch water, some means of firewood production and storage. Honestly, the easiest thing here is to just use the Giving Tree mod and collect branches from a few trees on your lot daily. And third is a fireplace. And I like to use the Functional Fires mod from the Plumbob Keep. To be honest, most things on this list today are going to be from the Plumbob Keep. So there are ways to utilize these medieval themed mods to our gameplay in the 19th century. And the Functional Fires mod allows you to create fires that produce ashes when they burn out, and also to actually use fodder for your fire. So you actually have to use split logs or branches. So you need resource chains. And I've also listed here the best mods for realistic farming, gardening, and artisanal trades. And all of these mods work together and have intermixing resource production for realistic gameplay. These are all from the Plumbob Keep as well. They are incredible and realistic, and I just love the way that things from one mod interact with another. So the vinegar making mod and the wine making mod can go together. To make cheese, you need rennet from the butcher shop or lemons from the fruit trees and salt from the salt making one. So definitely have a look through all of these. You're probably going to want all of them, as I did. Let's talk about the social classes. I know this is a really integral part of this challenge, but it's also one of the most complicated and confusing ones. So as you can see, I've actually changed the financial boundaries of each of the social classes. We'll get to that in a second. But what the social classes do is they restrict essentially a few things: who your Sims should be marrying, and also what kind of jobs they're eligible for, as well as whether or not they can pursue education and stuff like that. The career options for the lower class are primarily limited to artisanal trades and manual labor. So they can be a farmer, a vintner, a butcher, a costermonger, potter, or any other home lot craftables like sewing and weaving. And the things on this list, a costermonger and a potter, those are very specific rabbit hole careers that I have created. I'm not releasing them to the public yet because I'm still working out a few bugs and I just want it to be pristine and perfect for you guys. But that is coming in the near future. I want to release a little pack of a bunch of lower class careers for you. Home lot businesses are acceptable, but in the lower class, you cannot yet open up a storefront on a community lot. That is reserved from the lower middle class and up. Only your first 3 families in the lower class can use the grant money rewards from your home business. This is so that social mobility is a little bit more limited in the lower class. Ideally, it's more challenging to get out of the lower class than to move around between the upper middle and upper class. So that's just kind of designed to put some limitations. However, I do allow this to be a little bit more flexible in your first 3 families because I know that we are all eager for the town to start progressing and building and growing. So that's totally fine. However, that money must be put directly back into the town by creating a store or parish church or something that other Sims in the neighborhood can utilize. And ideally, I don't like it to count towards social status requirements. Do what you will. If you want it to count for social class requirements, go for it. Excuse me while I play laser with my cat so he stops destroying my entire apartment. You may not sell items directly from the inventory, especially all of those like food and produce items that you get from the Plum Bob Keep mods about like food and produce and vegetables and stuff. You may only do that once that action is unlocked, which you do by adding a grocery store to the neighborhood. So by that process, I kind of justify it as though you now have a place to sell your produce to, which would be the local grocery or market. And so the minimum inheritance and dowries required to reach the next social class for all of the kids in that generation are 10,000. So the lower class is really the only one that's a little bit different than the others. I just chose 10,000 kind of randomly. The lower class family funds I've actually changed to 0 to 40,000. I think that might be a little much for some houses. So what I'm personally doing is like homes in more developed areas like downtown. I think lower class should still be about 30,000 for the upper boundary, but I wanted to have a little bit more mobile space for farming families and agricultural families, and that stuff adds up really quickly, and so that's what the expanded upper limit is for there. Sorry for the dramatic and terrible lighting change. OBS decided to stop recording my audio for the last 3/4 of my video, so I am re-recording this at 6 in the morning. So the lower middle class family fund parameters are between 40,000 simoleons and 70,000. This is really designed for lower middle class families to be proper artisan and craft families. So these are families who can open up their own storefront off of their home lot. So in the lower middle class, you can actually start to purchase community lots. And you don't technically have to just do artisanal crafts, so you can also have a couple options in the rabbit hole careers. Those options are politics, medicine, law enforcement, slacker, military, and criminal. And your Sims may sell novels and paintings. So I have decided to add in these kind of creative restrictions as well. You don't have to play with that if you don't want to, but I felt like it was fairly unrealistic that people would have access to that much paper and painting supplies in the lower class. And this is where the dowry and inheritance requirements do start to become important. So the minimum requirement is 20,000 simoleons, and you can see that that is approximately half of the minimum amount of family funds. This is really designed so that a sim of the lower middle class marrying another sim of the lower middle class would be able to maintain that 40,000 simoleon minimum when they move off of their family lots. Ideally, it's just to keep your Sims in the same social class in which they grew up. And when I'm saying like family funds, I actually mean like family net worth. So this isn't just the amount of money that your Sims have in the bank, it is actually just your entire household net worth that you can find in the upper left-hand corner in build and buy mode. So the upper middle class have a family fund parameter of 70,000 simoleons and 100,000. Your career options are athletic, journalism, adventure, science, culinary, and business. And you can keep the first 3 tiers of business reward grants for personal use. The inheritance and dowry requirements jump all the way up to 35,000. And a quick note that these are not the dowry and inheritance requirements that a sim has to have for an arranged marriage. This is just so that your family can qualify for elevation into the next social class, because they have to prove that they are solid enough in that social class to keep their children in that social class when they marry as well. That's very important in the social mobility here. Now, the upper class is ranging from 100,000 simoleons to 200,000, and basically you have full selection of all of the careers. This isn't every career in the game. I think these are primarily just base game. However, in the upper middle and upper class especially, you do have all of these options that are added with university, so you can really do quite well. But the career options basically are paranormal, show business, artist, and natural scientist. And you may use all the business reward grants for personal use. And that also means that your families can open up several businesses, and if a different sim opens up a different business, then they can go through all of those grant rewards as well, I believe. So that can really, really add up, and this encourages your upper class sims to really continue expanding the neighborhood. And the dowry and inheritance requirements are 50,000 simoleons. So that is really steep, but it's designed to be challenging. And then, last but not least, we have the royal aristocracy. So your family funds for that have to be above 200,000, but basically upon reaching 200,000 in your family household net worth, your family will be granted a royal title, and we'll come back to that in a minute. But the career options, I mean, you can do whatever you want at this point, but careers aren't really fashionable. It's advisable to simply focus on skilling or the creative and high arts, and also developing your social networks further. Alright, so I feel like there's quite a bit of confusion about how social mobility works within the social classes. So we're going to take a few minutes to talk about ranking up through the social classes. A family's social status may not change during a given generation. At the birth of the next generation in that particular family, that next generation's social class is decided. And to meet eligibility to move up to the next rank, 3 primary requirements must be met. 4 for the upper class. 1. Does the house net worth meet the next qualifying level's minimum funds? 2. Do all children in the current generation have inheritances and dowries that meet the current class minimum? And 3, is the current generation free from any scandals? A scandal is generally something of your doing for the sake of drama. Like an affair that gets discovered, or a feud that gets out of hand, or a crime. It's up to you to take creative liberty here. This does include teenage and adult children who marry or elope beneath their social rank, despite dowry requirements being met. So an unsuited marriage will always prevent social rank elevation, unless you are marrying someone only one class beneath you. If you jump beyond one class beneath you, that is when it becomes a scandal. And for the upper class, all of your families must send their children to college or finishing school to also meet the next rank requirement, which is just royal aristocracy. So your Sims could just like happily stay in the upper class. And I use these banks for dowries and inheritances. They're from the Plumbob Keep. I've linked it here for you. Now, a little bit more into royal titles. As mentioned, when a family reaches 200,000 family funds, they will take upon a royal title, and royal titles have their own separate elevation process. Each title granted must start and eventually move through this order. Although elevation does not have to occur, you could absolutely keep your families with one specific elevation and not move them any further. And so I'm not going to list out all of them, but you guys will have access to this in the description below. So I encourage you to follow the Google Doc and consider this yourself when you're working through your own game. So we have the order from 1 to 9, 1 being the lowest in the rank, 9 obviously being the highest. And I have limitations about how many of these titles you can give out in one neighborhood. Honestly, I don't think you will get to the point where you use all of them, but those are there if you want to use them. So you'll see that the first rank has, you can only have 10 in the neighborhood, and these numbers after each title over here on the very end, Those are your daily stipends or funds that you're getting from tax money, from the town, from the parish. So for a baron, you would get 2,000 a day. For a duke, you would get 5,000 a day. And titles are inherited to the firstborn male or female if there is no male heir. They remain within families specifically. And I do want to create and make available a royal aristocracy career that will provide these families with daily tax money from their region or parish. A family being elevated into a royal title will change the structure of their immediate parish, as their home will now be called an estate, and they make money from their community directly. It's up to you to decide on the boundaries of your parish, and until I release the custom content career, you should probably just cheat and add the amount following the titles daily to their family funds. Once all available royal title slots have been filled, you may create a new neighborhood district. I usually do business districts to create a new region. This new region may be assigned an entirely separate set of royal titles, but to be honest, you're probably gonna, I think you'll likely hit your sim file limit before you get there. Now for universities and finishing school, we will get there at some point in my challenge. It's expected for all upper class and aristocracy teenagers to attend university or finishing school, and 2 different universities will be created, separated by gender. Attending university costs 15,000 simoleons and will be deleted directly from family funds. However, you will keep track of this money in a spreadsheet, as this money will be considered endowment funds and will go towards constructing community buildings in that college itself, such as libraries, gyms, cafes, music halls, etc. Teenagers are to leave for college at the end of their 7th day of teenagehood. Their time at college will equal approximately 7 days in the main neighborhood as well. They are only eligible to go if they have reached skill level 8 in 7 different skills. Students will start family houses where everyone with that last name lives when attending university. Families may send money with their children via custom content banks or just items in their inventories to sell to build up their university estate, or they may simply rely on scholarship money and grants for good grades. I recommend doing both, because if you have level 8 in 7 different skills, you should probably have about 8 options of scholarship funds. Now for social class events, which we are still, I think, kind of parsing out and working to incorporate in the game, each social class may host their own events intended exclusively for the people of that class and usually of that parish. So the lower class and lower middle have the opportunity to have country dances and parish festivals. Upper middle, upper, and royal aristocracy have court dances, private parties, and balls. Of course, we intend to expand these options a little further in the future, but this is where we're starting. While a member of a social class cannot attend a lower ranked event without scandal, a member can be invited to attend an event of the rank above them if they have close relatives on good terms. This will not induce scandal and would be a good opportunity to meet eligible bachelors and ladies. Now for probably my favorite part of the game, although it's clearly the most morbid part, the mortality rates. So at the birth of a sim, you are to roll for their mortality rates. This will determine how long they will live a natural life, excluding any tragedies, which can and will still occur. I recommend creating 3 separate spreadsheets to keep track of your mortality rolls as they change based on social class. I usually use the random number generator provided by Google, set the appropriate boundaries like choosing a random number between 1 and 6, and typically consider the roll of the number 1 to be the mortality. And for our 3 original spouses, I usually just let them live a full natural life, although of course tragedies do occur and can occur, as we have, encountered twice for our 3 original spouses in my challenge. So I'm not going to read off and explain every single mortality rule here, but I think it's pretty easy to read. So like toddler, we have 1 out of 6 chance of death. child, 1 out of 9 in the lower class, etc., etc. If you have any specific questions about that, let me know. I'm happy to help. And you may take creative liberties with how your Sims die if they roll a mortality. Usually I just use the bool prop testing cheats enabled true cheat, shift click on the sim, select spawn, and then choose the Rodney's death tester. I think that's what it's called. I usually just use death by disease. However, I also recommend doing this in moments of your game that make sense with narrative continuity. For instance, with women who are teenagers or adults, I will use the mortality roll after childbirth and kind of use that narrative event. Fires. I'm still traumatized by this. Okay, in the beginning of my game, I tend not to let my Sims call the fire department. This is designed because the neighborhood is still very small and doesn't yet have the structure or population to support a fire department. Once your neighborhood has reached the upper class, it should be large enough, and you are now permitted to call the fire department. Because fires in the 19th century were oftentimes devastating, I don't let my Sims use fire extinguishers. Instead, I focus on getting my Sims out of the house and waiting until the fire naturally goes out. This is quite a chore, as you must keep your Sims occupied because they are obsessed with running back into the house. It's likely that you will lose at least one Sim in a fire. You don't need to roll a mortality. The game is just designed to be challenging during a fire, and a death is fairly inevitable. And I also like that this causes quite a lot of household damage. I think it's very realistic. Another tragedy that can occur happens during childbirth. There's a chance that your Sim will die in childbirth. After each childbirth, I roll a 1 out of 15 chance that the mother will die. If you'd like to make it more challenging, you may lower the roll after every birth, meaning that a woman's first birth is 1 out of 15 chance of dying. During her second, she has a 1 out of 14 chance, and during her third birth, a 1 out of 13 chance, and so on. I don't normally play this way because I think the game is hard enough as it is, but if you want some added challenge there, go for it. And then we also have occupational hazards. So if you'd like, you may also set up an occupational hazard roll, usually for men's labor jobs. If your Sim is a miner, for instance, I recommend doing a 1 out of 20 roll every single time he goes into the mines. I like to use a slightly higher roll for this, as occupations usually require daily risk, and you don't want all of your male Sims dying quickly because that gets frustrating real fast. Now, another fun part of the challenge is illness and disease. And I say fun in a very strange way because I am a historian of medicine and disease. So I think it's a fun time. And you guys probably think I'm strange, but that's fine. So The Sims 2 has a really excellent natural disease mechanism. Your Sims can catch colds and the flu from cockroaches on the lot or other Sims who are sick. And there's also a bubonic rats mod that you can use that function a lot like the cockroaches and can also get your Sim sick. I love those. Although technically they can die in the vanilla game from this, the chances are honestly pretty low. Because of this, I use the realistic illnesses mod. The infectivity rate seems naturally pretty high, to the point that one Sim in your household will likely get everyone else sick, as well as everyone else outside of the household that they interact with, so it spreads through your community very quickly. The realistic illnesses mod simply makes illness more dangerous. Usually a Sim is ill for about 2 to 3 days, which I find to be a good length. You will need to keep your sick Sims well fed, well rested, and seated for most of the time to prevent them from dying. This is challenging in lower and lower middle class homes where work needs to get done and there's a lot of work. And this will naturally increase the chance of a Sim dying in those households. In well-to-do households, however, I just recommend focusing on keeping your Sims well rested and seated with a book for most of the day, and they should be okay. Of course, tragedies do occur even in the wealthiest of homes. I think this mod functions well enough that I don't find the need to roll my own mortality rates when a Sim gets sick. However, there is an intervention that you can use if something goes wrong with your mortality rolls. So if a sim has rolled an early mortality rate and you're very invested in keeping them alive longer, say that they're your heir to a wealthier household and the only child, you may send them to stay in a hospital. Of course, this is dependent on you actually already having a hospital in your neighborhood, so this is not an option early game. A sim may spend up to 3 days total in a hospital during their life, and each day you may do a 1 out of 4 chance that they will live into the next life stage. The caveat here is that each day in hospital costs 15,000 simoleons, so it is unlikely that you will have more than one chance financially to roll for your sim to live. In this roll, the 1 is not the mortality number, but the chance to survive. If you want that sim to live through their next life stage, they will need to be hospitalized again for another roll. But once your 3 chances are up, you have run out of opportunities, and the natural life course of disease will play itself out. Thanks to the Plumbob Keep's quality mod, we also have some fun daily medicaments and apothecary stuff that we can play with. Primarily tea. Of course, for this to be used on a broad scale in your neighborhood, you first need an apothecary. This is not a rabbit hole career, rather you will likely have a household in your neighborhood that has a small, or large, herb garden who crafts the teas for sale. It is an artisanal trade. In this period, it is unlikely that an apothecary would be called to the house like a practitioner. Instead, Sims may visit the local apothecary and purchase from them. However, if your apothecary is only running from a home lot, I recommend inviting the apothecary over, shift-clicking and making them selectable, and then having them gift a medicinal tea to your sim in question. For continuity's sake, I also recommend gifting the apothecary a small sack of about 100 simoleons as payment, and I just use the banks mod that I also use for dowries and such. Here is a link to the tea mod that you absolutely must have because it is so fun, and it also includes some coffee plants and coffee production as well. I've kind of listed out the basic teas that I like to use for my game, and I'm not going to read them all off, but you can see here that we have regular beverage teas and herbal teas and medicinal teas, and some of them do quite a lot of stuff like kill your sim. So very fun, highly recommend it. Now on to the nitty-gritty stuff. The kitchen is an important facet of the 19th century home. No matter the social class, there are some key parts to the kitchen that should be fairly constant. In most kitchens, you will want to make sure you have one stove, at least, a fridge, several counters, storage shelves, and a fireplace or hearth. Make sure you're using the Plumbob Keep's Functional Fires mod. I like to center their small iron grates into normal or decorative fireplaces by using bullprop testing sheets enabled true, bullprop snap objects to grid false, and move objects on. These fires allow daily maintenance. Every morning, Sims should collect ashes from the fireplace and light a fire using firewood from the same mod or branches from the Plumbob Keep's Giving Tree mod. You do not have to do this daily in the summer, but in the fall and winter especially, I make sure this is a daily activity to keep the home warm. I also like to use the autonomous objects from the Plumbob Keep that allow my Sims to autonomously collect ashes, start and maintain fires. In lower class and lower middle homes, oftentimes the kitchen is the entire main room of the house and will function as the kitchen, living, and dining area. I also recommend a preservation pot and preparation board for regular processing and storing of vegetables and fruits. These items can go directly into the fridge, but I like including preserves, herbs, both processed and raw, and vegetables and herbal and medicinal teas on the kitchen storage shelves for a little bit of realistic flair, because I think kitchen storage is kind of understated in this game. But anyways, you should be able to use IM to move objects around on the shelves into different slots. I am working on a rabbit hole career for the collection of ashes and dust and the running of the local dust yard, but in the meantime, I recommend designating a sim to run the dust yard and work as dustmen. You may turn their home lot into the dust yard or a community lot. And the job of the dustman was to go from house to house and collect dust and ashes. Have your family invite over the designated dustman and gift him all the ashes and dust in your inventory. It would not be custom for individuals to sell dust from their own property in home stores. The dust will then be sold from the dust yard itself. Eventually, the Plum Upkeep wants to create a soap making mod using the ashes, but that is probably still some time away. However, it will drastically expand our playstyle, involving dust here even more. Now, finally, we have parishes and schools. So, as mentioned before, it's up to you to define the boundaries of your parish. For me, a parish is determined by the local church and how many families it can hold. For my first parish, for example, it has enough space for about 6 families. It's designed to be a small community, so you can have small social gatherings every Sunday, and much larger than 6 families gets really out of hand really quickly and a little bit hard to manage. So the families involved in a parish are usually determined based on proximity. I recommend creating a parish spreadsheet to keep track of who belongs to what parish. A Sims parish determines whether they can get married at that church and also what school children can attend. Typically, I find it best to create a family for the parson or pastor of the church who will own the church property, which is a community lot, and yes, you can cheat to generate enough wealth to own the church. Closely associated with the parish communities are also the schools. I typically start with elementary or grammar schools, as teens in the lower and lower middle classes will typically not attend school and instead help out around the house. I also use the Teenamator mod to allow teenage marriage and pregnancy and make teenage Sims after the 7th day of that life stage functionally act like adults getting jobs and moving out. Using the Sim Logical mod, I create a small 1-room schoolhouse. It has a capacity of 12 seats for children, and you will need the lot to be residential, meaning that technically someone will need to live on this lot. From my understanding, the Sim living on the lot doesn't technically have to be the teacher or principal, and your Sims will still go to the regular rabbit hole school when playing their home lot, but this gives you the opportunity for storytelling and cinematography and to watch them interact and develop relationships at school. So I've linked both of those mods below and included my favorite default food mod. I think it is absolutely requisite. So I'm not going to get into all of the custom content that I use for this game. I think we're probably going to do another custom content video to really scope that out because gosh, this video is probably enough as it is. So thank you for watching. Please let me know if you try this. Send me some comments down below or hop in the Discord and keep us updated on what you're doing in your Victorian challenge yourself. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out the link below for the Google Doc for all of these instructions. See you next time!